Over 100 Nobel laureates, including the Dalai Lama and Australia's Peter Doherty, are calling on world leaders to stop the expansion of fossil fuels. Professor Doherty joins me live now. Of course, he's the patron and namesake of the Doherty Institute. Thank you for your time, as always, Professor Doherty. Why did you sign on with your fellow Nobel laureates to this? Explain your thinking for us ahead of what is an important summit to be convened by Joe Biden.
Karen, I've been involved for some years now in trying to communicate about climate change. It's not my field of science. As people will realise, I'm basically in viral immunity, and I've been talking largely about COVID, and I've been massively obsessed with that for the past year. But I have written books and attended various international symposia, talked a lot to climate scientists, and have been involved in trying to communicate about this. And so when this call came out, I checked out what was being asked, and I'm in total agreement, so I signed on.
And in terms of what's not being done now, what sort of leadership would you like to see?
I think we can't be serious about trying to rapidly decrease global emissions of greenhouse gases, which, as we know, substantially come from burning fossil fuels, not totally, but substantially, without cutting back on the use of fossil fuels. I would have thought that was reasonably obvious. And climate change is not a local issue, it's a global issue. So fossil fuels that are burnt anywhere on the planet impact on our well-being. And if we're a major fossil fuel exporter, then basically, if we're going to make a real contribution, we have to do what we can to cut that supply chain. And I hadn't been watching this closely. I saw the Four Corners report last week, I think it was, and I was absolutely amazed by what was being said about this gas-led recovery idea. Now, the plan is to massively expand fossil fuel production and exports. There is no way we're making a positive contribution to ameliorating the consequences of global warming by increasing our level of fossil fuel export and production.
Our leaders have been praised for the response in COVID. This is linking your area of expertise with our discussion today, but I guess it's relevant to the extent that leaders have listened to the science in this sense. Would you urge them to listen to the science in that broader and longer term challenge?
Of course I would, Kieran, and I've only been praising our leaders, including the federal government, for what they've done with COVID. We've done so well, and we're admired for that internationally. I mean, people understand what we've done and how effective we've been, and our leaders have listened consistently to the science. Everything they put out is advised by the science. Now, it would be very naive to think that dealing with the economic issues around climate change, fossil fuel production, the issues for employment, the issues for regions and so forth, is as straightforward as dealing with COVID. Here, we have universal support pretty much for the actions that have been taken. In fact, the government's main challenge with COVID is how they get us out of this gilded cage we're living in, and whether voters will let them get us out if there's any risk. So there's a big task for them to do there. But when it comes to fossil fuels, we realise it's built into our economy. It's a major factor. But surely we have enormous potential to produce renewables here. We have enormous potential to develop a new and green economy, as is emphasised by people like Twiggy Forrest, people at BHP, many of our major companies. And if we're going to do that, expanding fossil fuel production is clearly not in line with it. What we need are transition plans for our economy, transition plans for our workers, and transition plans and adventurous and bold initiatives that come with government policy, but largely, I think, come from the private sector and come from that entrepreneurial sector that is so important in driving change.
Professor Doherty, just finally, it would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you about the mRNA vaccine. I know you've been very supportive of that technology. You believe it works and it will be the vaccine of the future. But how quickly can we have a domestic manufacture capacity of mRNA?
Well, the mRNA vaccines, of course, were totally new. We'd never used these in human beings before, and they've been spectacularly successful. That's the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, and we've had some Pfizer vaccine roll out here. And of course, we're hoping that as the US is all vaccinated, they've already vaccinated more than 30% of their people with at least one shot. But towards the end of the year, most of their population will be vaccinated, and we're hoping to get more doses, and the Prime Minister has organised that, and that's wonderful. So nothing but praise on that front. Now, we have now an initiative from the state of Victoria to put $50 million into developing the preliminary stages of developing that mRNA technology. That won't be nearly enough, but it will start things going. So my perception is it would be wonderful if the Prime Minister, through his national cabinet, could get together with the premiers and we could work out a strategy, which is a national strategy, to go forward with this, because COVID-19 is not going to be over this year, and we'll be lucky if it's over next year. What may well happen is we'll see emerging numbers of mutant variants that may require new order vaccines. And it will take us at least a year from now to get this up to speed. But if we could make those vaccines here, that would be a great advantage. Not only that, it would allow us to make a major contribution to what has to happen globally, because we have to help the poorer countries. And it would also start to transition our vaccine technology, because if these vaccines are indeed as good as they seem they are, and we've only been using them for a short time, but they look great, then it's very likely that influenza vaccines will go down the same road. So it's positioning ourselves for the future and for economic advantage.
Nobel laureate Professor Peter Doherty, I appreciate your insights, your time, as always. Thanks.
You're welcome.